As a Kanye West fan, Taylor Swift fans, I feel for you. I feel for you deeply. I know your pain. Your goat is washed. And not only is your goat washed, your goat is on the alt-right pipeline. What do you do? What do you do? Taylor isn't like Kanye West. Taylor isn't all the way down the alt-right pipeline yet. But she's on it. She's on it. It's undeniable. All the signs are there. There's a lot of parallels between the life of a showgirl and the life of Pablo. Now, Kanye West fans are going to get in the comments really mad at me because the life of Pablo, we love the life of Pablo. But undoubtedly, the life of Pablo is the beginning of Kanye West embracing hard right-wing philosophy. It's there in the promotion of the album, in the actual lyrics of the album, in the themes he chooses to address, in the way the album was made. God, this should be a longer video.
Do you feel that I'm feeling? Do you feel that I'm being free and I'm thinking free?
Okay, so this is a spot-on observation. Shout out to Khalil Gamble, very funny, very insightful, and plugged into his love and appreciation of hip-hop and music culture. Also, first things first, hi, hello, how are you? I'm Square Symbols, a musician, concerned citizen, and music nerd who's been very interested in this trajectory that Taylor Swift and Kanye West have been on for a decade now. Have I listened to all their stuff? No. Obviously, I am black and find Taylor's discog a little too unseasoned for my taste. Also, like many well-adjusted individuals, I kind of stopped listening to Ye religiously after the life of Pablo and his subsequent fallout or antagonism with Black America.
I actually don't think you're thinking anything. I think what you're doing right now is actually the absence of thought.
Second, what this video won't be is an exact equivocation or conflation between both Taylor and Ye's actions. While they share some creative and economic similarities, I can acknowledge that they're both marginalized in very specific ways that sometimes conflicts with each other. Ye is a black neurodivergent man who indeed is penalized for expressing his emotions and berated with racist nonsense when expressing anger, while living in a society working overtime to extract as much from him as humanly possible. But with that, his personal politic has always been, let's say, not the most sensitive to the plight of women, especially after.
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
He's been vocal about black issues consistently in his work. Well, the stuff I've listened to. And even though he's coming to the wrong conclusion, one can confidently say his work is engaging in a conversation regarding the black struggle. Taylor, while being worth more than 99% of the population, is still not immune to experiencing misogyny. And that specific marginalization does shape her work to an extent. We will get to that. But all to say that they are very different individuals, obviously. I have to clarify that because people really like to remove nuance from comparative conversations. Also, this isn't a moral comparison. Obviously, Ye's blatant anti-blackness and now full fash art is not the same as or on the same level of direct harm as Taylor. I pollute the planet while using my private jet Swift.
Taylor Swift is not just a music icon, but a business powerhouse. The recent crossing of the billionaire threshold allowed her to indulge in real estate. With a net worth of a staggering $1.1 billion, Taylor doesn't hesitate to spend money on opulence, such as her private jets. In 2011, Taylor Swift acquired a Dassault Falcon 900, a sleek and powerful aircraft at a cost exceeding $40 million. However, this luxurious lifestyle hasn't been without controversy. As concerns over environmental impact grew, Taylor Swift, like other celebrities, faced criticism for her frequent private jet use. Amidst the extensive air travel logged during Taylor Swift's ongoing Eras tour, there's been a noticeable shift in her private jet usage in 2023. A spokesperson for the artist has confirmed that she's significantly curtailed her jet usage, and notably has purchased more than double the required carbon credits to offset the emissions generated throughout her tour.
Different things are different. One spews awful, regressive rhetoric, and the other uses white pop feminism to do whatever she wants. We will discuss some intersections between those things later, but I just want to make that clear now. And finally, I know that Taylor has been personally victimized by Ye with the award show nonsense and then the creepy famous controversy. And I think that does it for all of the clarifications. In order to fully understand this decline, that I would say that these two artists who are famous for releasing full bodies of work that are always stylized in specific eras, we'd have to fully examine the road to both albums. The Life of Pablo for Ye and Life of a Showgirl for Taylor. So let's have at it.
Did it become apparent there would be a trade of some sorts?
Whatever wildfire happened last year creatively for Taylor and I think we didn't want to stop writing songs together, and still don't really. And I, she's just, it's kind of like somehow I ended up on the team with the best player, so you just want to keep passing the ball.
You can see creative similarities that telegraph this, I want to say, professional de-evolution with how they collaborate. What I feel added to Ye's production range was his love for alternative rock and the indie scenes of the 2000s, leading him to collaborate with Bon Iver multiple times during his peak villain era, i.e. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus. What does kind of bum me out about these collaborations is that even though they sound great, unlike Ye's earlier work, kind of outsources all of the creative meat, poor choice of words, I know, of the songs to his collaborators, if that makes sense. A great example is probably the song I'm In It, where if you factor out Assassin and Justin's verses on the songs, you're left with a gross, unlistenable mess.
Girl sipping white wine, put my fist in, I like a civil rights sign.
But to my point, Taylor also employed this strategy in her recent run with her 2020 records Folklore, Evermore, and the Tortured Poets Department. I almost said Tortured Poets Society. Is hilarious. All records that expressed a shift in her songwriting style, highlighted a more mature, minimalist approach akin to indie guitar and piano music. But to my point, she also co-wrote these projects with Aaron Dessner, which makes sense. He writes solid stuff, and this cross-cultural list of collaborations just proves that many big-name artists in the music industry just do what Big Sean said.
I'm over niggas saying they the hottest niggas, then run to the hottest niggas just to stay hot.
Another main similarity with these two is how they both kind of use their specific marginalization to victimize themselves and seek liberation purely from a greedy capitalist lens. Ye mainly popping off on folks regarding how he wishes to be in the big leagues with the wealthy white Europeans, with the main focus of his brand since, I want to say, 2009, to be a business mogul, a la the white billionaires who garnered their wealth via the slave trade in generations prior, or exploited their workforces to an egregious extent.
Standing up and I'm telling you, I am Warhol. I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Walt Disney, Nike, Google. Now, who's going to be the Medici family and stand up and let me create more? Or do you want to marginalize me till I'm out of my moment?
Also, most of them were raging anti-Semites.
Walt Disney.
And Taylor using girl boss feminism to boost her own personal profile, gatekeeping and gaslighting her way to the top. Like, sure, there are valid ways in which Taylor has indeed experienced misogyny. That hasn't really inspired her to challenge the very noticeable anti-blackness in her fan base, or actually say much of anything regarding the treatment of non-white femmes at all, down to her being a major polluter to the climate via her private jet usage. Something that disproportionately affects women in the global south and other countries who are on the very violent receiving end of wealth extractive capitalism and climate change. She also went as far as to send a cease and desist to the person who's cataloging this jet info. But we're talking about pipelines here, so let's talk about the music. So going back to 808 and Heartbreaks, I say Ye's most important and influential work, which kind of marked the end of a well thought out and emotionally connected Ye. I know a lot of hip-hop heads at the time really couldn't connect with it due to its stark differences in structures and styles, but in terms of communicating themes, getting older in life, and seeing the contrast between Ye being a working creative, constantly on the road and on the go, with his friends being at the age where they're having kids and raising families and building community. What we're engaging with here is a real conversation with layers of honesty and vulnerability not seen in hip-hop or with men in music in general, at least at that time. It's pretty par for the course now with artists who are developing. Folklore and Evermore follow this compositional departure, with Taylor deviating from autobiographical songs about exes and breakups and building broader narratives with characters and stories akin to modernist literature. Albums made to feel like a cozy book that you can read by the campfire. These records, due to their intimate nature, brought her back in the leagues of the acoustic singer-songwriter, slightly deviating from the pop star train that she was on the previous decade. Ingraining herself in an intellectual indie aesthetic helped her brand slightly mature without her having to make any drastic changes. Regardless, growth is growth. Moving on, Twisted Fantasy and Yeezus kind of signal where Ye's writing style is going more than anything. While great and creatively expansive, these records definitively... Really, bro? While great and creatively expansive, these records definitively signal how Ye was falling into a gooned out, less coherent persona. with the features on Twisted Fantasy making up for the lack of hard-hitting bars on the project. And Yeezus primarily focusing on its sharp production with a lot of songs that lack substance, and looking at the context of songs like Blood on the Leaves, a song that samples a track lamenting the lynchings of black folks being used to bemoan a failed relationship. We can kind of see how Ye views his personal marginalization. Not as a person fighting for liberation of folks who look like him, but as him kind of complaining about what he feels is owed to him.
Written not by an African-American activist, but by a Jewish high school teacher from New York. And just a warning, the photo you'll see that inspired the song is disturbing. What was he like?
He was one of the funniest people you'd ever want to meet, but he was also, we learned, one of the angriest people you'd ever want to meet.
What was it that drove that anger?
You know, we had slavery, we had Reconstruction, we had lynching, we have Jim Crow today. I mean, when are we ever going to be what we claim to be?
Brothers Michael and Robert Meeropol are proud sons, even prouder of their father's legacy.
The connection to Abel Meeropol and Strange Fruit is very powerful because here's the man who wrote the anti-lynching anthem.
An anthem made famous by blues legend Billie Holiday.
Blood on the leaves and blood at the road.
But inspired by a horrific scene from Marion, Indiana in 1930.
New Slaves kind of does the same thing, where Ye is primarily focused on how he's viewed as a consumer and a resource, but can't really contextualize these frustrations past wanting the same wealth and empire white folks have access to. And sure, there are allusions to the prison industrial complex here, but they are framed through his personal desire for white generational wealth. Within these projects, although they are rooted in a love and expansion of black music, they highlight the vanity and personal and grieved entitlement that Ye will be known for in his more erratic or incomplete work. It became clear here that Ye wanted to use his proximity to whiteness, the right to have high-value white women, and robust industry, wealth, and respect. Not because the lineage of black art under capitalism continues to be sucked dry of its original context, but because he's owed these things personally. Taylor loosely mirrors this response in her specific marginalization as well. Following Scooter Braun's acquisition of Swift's former label, Big Machine Records, along with the masters for her first 6 records, Swift, in order to gain autonomy over the rights of her own work, began re-recording and releasing her version of her OG catalog. This is actually a huge deal. And an issue, seeing how the labor of artists are usually owned by record labels who initially devalue their artist as a low-risk investment, only to rake in the cash once said artist pops off. This isn't helped by the litany of shady owners, sometimes gambling song rights away, selling off masters without the artist's consent, or writing away the rights to these masters under the nose of artists completely. Not to mention the music industry's legacy of stealing song rights away from women specifically. I can name so many examples of this. But to keep it brief, this could have been a huge step forward for artists in regards to how we advocate for ourselves in the current day. Sadly, it kind of just became a way for Taylor to defeat her opponents in the music economy and constantly throw the same product at her audience with slight variations to milk them for all they're worth. I'm sorry, but we gotta talk about this because it's so egregious. You mean to tell me that Taylor just randomly drops a deluxe or special edition of her recent project on the same weekend or Friday that maybe Billie Eilish or Charli XCX released their albums? It's not like her broad audience will clamor for this project under the guise of some exclusive track or just to give it another spin. In turn, could stop Billie or Charli from reaching the top of the charts that week. Seems a little backhanded to me, and at the very least, it's pretty anti-feminist if you think about it. This coupled with the myriad of album variants, and it's looking like Taylor's feminism is just an infinite money glitch for her marketing team. 20 plus variants of her most recent project, 20 plus of Tortured Poets, and the versions of Midnight, 10 plus of Folklore, and it seems to go on and on. Both Taylor and Ye, their specific fans, be it from the black male neurodivergent lens or Taylor's white lady perspective, we have both of them kind of perpetually victimizing themselves while also looking to use their specific standpoints or identities to extract as much capital as possible. And just like Ye in the early 2010s, we see the veil of integrity begin to slip for Taylor over the past 5 or 6 years due to her personal entitlement. With Tortured Poets department, Swift kind of leans more into the melodrama and the over-the-top emotions and self-indulgence, with the full official length of the project within its anthology release totaling over 2 hours. 2 hours of mid, sadly. But that's all the records before, so let's get to the most recent work.
So special because, like with my albums, I love to kind of, you know, showcase sort of like aspects of my personality that are in the
Now we can finally talk about the life of Pablo and its modern day counterpart, the life of a showgirl. Could this title and the initial video be a joke? Yes. It probably was. Or maybe it wasn't. Let's look into it. Caked in a pretentious and deceptive Shakespearean metaphor, the life of a showgirl starts with a conservative trad wife messaging about being saved or liberated from despair by the acquisition of a traditional heterosexual relationship. Why is this important? Well, up until now, on a few different fronts, especially with Tortured Poets and the litany of albums before 2020, Taylor mainly wrote about exes, finding songs lacking in the reflection department and annoying in the victimization aspect. They are at the very least highlighted by a level of agency and control over one's personal expression, in a way in which one can do a feminist reading of Taylor's work. I mean, I'm not going to do that, but someone could. But now she's literally pledging allegiance to a man.
Be there. Why would a man be there? No, it's actually pissing me off. Oh my God, it pisses me off. Why would a man be there?
And I feel like this is where her audience disconnected from the album, and also what signaled her fully falling down the alt-right, or let's just say typical conservative pipeline, while also maintaining a tinge of intellectualism by kicking this whole project in references to classic literature and lazy metaphors. This opening rings true to me, but in a different font with the two beginning tracks on the Life of Pablo. Hold on, let me explain. It can be hard to truly have a conversation about Blackness and its ties to Western or European Christianity. The two have ingrained themselves within each other and within our communal spaces and organizing spaces. Thankfully, conversation is becoming more mainstream, with millennials and Gen Z being one of the most secular generations ever, or non-religious than their previous generations. And with films like Sinners releasing this year, baking that into its very overtly Black messaging, it seems like this is now a more modern conversation. But back to Ye. Both Ultralight Beam and Father Stretch My Hands basically cover the themes that this album explores. While many say it's about Ye's battle between his faith and fleshly desires, what I feel like this album communicates is Ye's allegiance to prosperity gospel, which refers to,
sometimes referred to as the prosperity gospel, the health and wealth gospel, the gospel of success, seed faith gospel, faith movement, or word of faith movement, is a belief among some charismatic Christians that financial blessing and physical well-being are always the will of God for them, and that faith, positive scriptural confession, and giving to charitable and religious causes will increase one's material wealth. Material, and especially financial success, is seen as an evidence of divine grace or favor and blessings, and the opposite, that of judgment.
See this pretty clearly with the first track's grand softness, emotive features, and builds, only to go into probably one of my favorite Ye choruses. And then we get the motto bleached asshole verse. In this contingency, the very strange and lack of humanity Ye has for women in his gooned out mind stands right beside his righteous love for God, as well as his relentless pursuit of wealth. Because a lot like Taylor and her liberation via Travis Kelce, these are the things that are owed to them via their long suffering. They are both tortured poets, so to speak, in their adherence to big C capitalism, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Eldest Daughter, a lot like a decent amount of Ye's songs, lean on anti-Blackness, and Taylor, a lot like Ye, domesticating their partner. Coming right after Father Figure, a song where Taylor asserts dominance by upholding gendered versions of control and protection, Eldest Daughter just relies on the same passive I'm not like other girls branding of the 2010s. Which you can see in Taylor's earlier work. The specific dig at Black women here is incredibly intentional due to her fiance's, let's say, preference for Black women in the past, with him communicating that via his aesthetic or self-expression. Now that Taylor has him though, he can freely express himself as a cop or a random hiker-coded type individual. This kind of aesthetic control reminds me of Ye on FML, and generally how Ye treats the women he's involved with it being well documented that he, to an extent, built Kim up to be a fashion mogul. And most recently dictates what his current partner, are they married? I don't know. I hope not. Anyway, he controls how little she wears, even though we can clearly see that it makes her uncomfortable. Not saying that these situations are one-to-one, but it very clearly clues you in on who's taking up the most space in the relationship, as well as highlights how, even though they clearly present their public personas in different ways, we have a slight idea in regards to who is telling who to do what. Wishlist and its Life of Pablo sister track Wolves really drives home how similar these albums are thematically. Both harbor very strange possessive ideas around partnership that have more to do with ownership of a person that other folks have access to, and not that much to do with how this person specifically makes them feel. But it's a very external appreciation of them with emphasis on the songwriter's own, again, self-aggrandizement. Taylor having to differentiate herself between other women, their surface-level material wants and desires, while she, a nice, clean white woman, just wants a big, strong man to knock her up and have hella kids with. And Ye expressing a very weird compassion for Kim Kardashian by her finally having found someone who's worthy. Him specifically. And then making very strange biblical references in regards to their relationship and child. Now we have to talk about Wood, a very, I want to say, uncomfortable foray into cheeky sexuality that hasn't really been a part of Taylor's brand over the years. Not saying she doesn't fuck, because that's none of my business, but the image of Taylor, specifically the jilted every girl, thin, innocent, romantically passed over for the aforementioned curvy girls who express themselves in ways that Taylor is just too quirky to vibe with. Part of what makes Taylor's brand so enduring is that she's been in a state of arrested development for over a decade now, and the accessibility of her appeal blends into the status quo of the loneliness crisis. Many have been on the receiving end for some time now. I know this seems like a lot, but Taylor's white purity has been a huge part of her appeal subconsciously for a while, and is mainly why folks like Charlie and to an extent Billy's recent domination irks her on some level. They've been able to expand their identity within their whiteness, while that simply has not been the option for her. Because Taylor exists in the prison of perpetual girlhood, which is why the track Wood is so deeply cringe. It's just a collection of dick puns, nothing else. And look, if that's what you vibe with, that is fine and okay. And obviously this links to The Life of Pablo because that record is just obsessed with sex, but like in a very tasteless and exhibitionist type of way. That again, makes the listener uncomfortable if they think twice about it. But moving on. Canceled is a song. It just helps me reflect on how out of touch both of these artists are in regards to how often they signal that everyone else refuses to think for themselves, while they themselves are edgy, free, and able to hold nuances.
We need to think how to think free. We need to be free thinkers. Then we need to learn how to feel free. People say feel free, but we don't even know how to feel free or think free.
But I don't know. These records are so exhausting to me because they are by nature hard to get through. Lacking range, it can be difficult to interpret them as complete artistic expressions. Released more as vain slop with limited ideas and very little to communicate if we're being honest. But what did we learn altogether? Well, to the point of this project, this is Taylor nailing herself down into pure trad wife mode. No real thoughts outside of her man, and I guess that's what alarmed her fan base so much. She has access to very lucrative bases of support. Her being a very simple, unremarkable pop icon, constantly flooding the show and streaming services with her work helped shape a complete ideologically toothless pop landscape. I'm not one of those weirdo metalheads who somehow feels like pop music holds no value. I think in generations prior, or even currently, on a slightly smaller scale, pop musicians have been able to carve out and communicate important ideas in ways that are celebratory and affirming. Taylor, a lot like Drake, kind of watered things down back into a very formulaic standard, where things got so muddled back into an extremely safe and predictable space, making it a great entry level for young folks getting into singer-songwriters. And since her songs are usually, by and large, about the same issues, she speaks to a large group of folks who view music more as the soundtracks of their lives, while also lacking any introspection or general junk food for folks who just want to hear some catchy songs. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Her shift into the conservative trad wife aesthetics is merely a reflection of where our culture is going within this country specifically. A lot like Ye's falling into far-right conservatism for nearly a decade now due to his self-obsessed greed, religious victimization, and Eurocentric standards, we can see Taylor's need to stay on top and recent appeals to conservatism as a sign that she's trying to protect her bag. Like it or not, this is the move, as we see a bunch of pop stars drape themselves in the American aesthetic to protect their positionality. It is wild how both Ye and Taylor released full Nazi merch too. I know, she quickly unreleased it. To my point, much of this current admin is more about directly signaling ties to a certain National Socialist regime of the German past. She's shown that she can play ball too, participate in the grooming needed to mold the minds of Femme America. But thankfully, I don't think her audience bought it. And that's also a huge portion of the grooming aspect of it. The trad wife movement is, by and large, spearheaded by women, ingenious capitalists. They are doing the labor of making and producing these video content to sell an aesthetic or a dream, to lull the masses into a sense of conservative trad wifery. when in reality, they are the managers of their own brand and are making a lot of money off of it. But that's all I got. What do you think? Do these similarities bug you? Do they make any sense? Am I reaching? Let me know. And if you made it this far, leave a ring or other form of jewelry emoji in the comments below. And if you want stuff like this sooner, consider joining my Patreon. You can find live drum footage, vids like this early, and exclusive content like the documentary that I'm working on about Black punks that I'm in the process of filming. You also get your name in the credits like the folks scrolling by now. Also, I think my last show of the year is going to be at the Grog Shop on November 16th. This will be my birthday show. I'll be playing drums with Morning of Black Star. We have Fatboy Sharif, Icky Reels, and Beans on the bill as well. So come out if you can. And I think that's it. Much love.